Call the meeting to order. And as we call the meeting to order, I would like to ask if everybody would join me in taking a moment of silence to remember those that have fallen since the last time we met. All right, thank you. All right, the minutes, the agenda is on your iPad. If you'll take a look at the minutes of the previous meeting and entertain a motion to accept.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah. All right, it's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion, comments, or corrections? Tammy, the excitement is palpable.
I know. I just want to make sure he's connected to the Wi-Fi.
I'll abstain because I wasn't at the meeting, so I don't know.
Okay, the motion carries. All right, the next item on the agenda is a presentation from Gallagher Benefit Services, Inc. And at the risk of harming his credibility before he gets before you, I'll introduce Bill Robinson here. And I've known Bill for about 9 years now, as I've served on the National Conference of Public Employee Retirement Systems Board. And through NCPERS, Gallagher Benefit Services has been providing group voluntary term life insurance plan. So without any further delay, Bill, you'd like to join us here, and welcome to Washington State. Okay, how about the microphone there? Just a little push so the green light comes on there.
Here we go. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Mr. Nelson, and members of staff, on behalf of NCPERS, I appreciate the opportunity to be here and make this presentation to you. We're going to talk briefly about the NCPERS Group Voluntary Life Term Life Program, and these are the kind of the general points I'd like to try and cover today in the time allotted to me. I'd like to give you a little bit of background on the plan objectives, its features, benefits to your members, its cost, the benefits to the board, and attempt to answer any questions you might have at the end of my discussion. The NCPERS Group Term Life Program was established in 1969. It's been around 45 years. And it currently serves over 125,000 public employees, retirees, and their dependents. I'm often asked, what does NCPERS have to do with group voluntary life insurance? NCPERS being a national public employees retirement trade association. And way back in 1969, I wasn't around, but I've been told the discussion was that NCPERS was looking for ways to provide some type of pension supplement services to its members, and that's really exactly what this program is. Although it is group term life insurance, it is really designed and thought of as a pension supplement service. In 2013, we're estimating to pay over $13 million in benefits to public employees and their dependents. The plan is extremely well reserved. It's insured by Prudential. Prudential's been the insurer from the beginning. And Gallagher Benefit Services, who I represent, is the managing consultant of the program. And we do have a professional administrator that administers the program for all 125,000 people that are currently in the program. As mentioned, this really is just thought of as a pension supplement program. It's a decreasing term life insurance plan. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in just a minute, but that means that the benefits are highest at earliest ages, and that's really, again, that's the pension supplement theory that Prudential and CPERS originally designed, was that the benefits are highest at the early age when people, public employees, particularly public safety employees, have their lowest accrued benefits under their pension plan, so they really need the pension supplement benefit even more at the early ages. The coverage continues into later life, and then it continues into retirement. So it provides life insurance into retirement, which is often very difficult for retirees to get. It does include accidental death and dismemberment, and it also includes benefits for spouses and dependent children. Plan features, it's unique. This plan is offered with no medical underwriting. It's a guaranteed issue program, so as long as people enroll during the open enrollment period, there is no medical underwriting or medical history required. In fact, there's no minimum premium, or excuse me, no minimum participation requirements either. So if the left board was to offer this plan and one person signed up for it, that wouldn't make any difference. We'd hope that it would be more than one person, but if one person signed up, the plan still would be in existence. It includes waiver premium. Again, this is a voluntary program. There's no employer or retiree system contributions required. This is designed to be paid by your members. Also, it includes the dependent coverage that I mentioned and accidental death. It is 24/7 coverage. It is full coverage on or off duty. There's no on-duty restrictions in this plan. With one exception, under the accidental death benefit, there is a provision for professional aviators. So if you do have a professional aviator that would be covered under this plan, and he or she were to die in a professional aviation accident, there would be no accidental death benefit, but the basic benefit would be paid. It includes an accelerated death benefit and has enhanced accidental death and dismemberment features such as tuition reimbursement, expatriation, seatbelt benefits, those sorts of things. The plan really, in the beginning, the designers of the plan wanted to make the plan as simple as possible. That's why the decreasing term design was selected. That means that there's one level premium paid throughout the lifetime of the individual. If you think about it, if there's sort of two approaches to life insurance. If you want to keep the premium constant, then the benefits need to go down over time because obviously the risk increases as we age. The other option would be to, if you want to keep the benefit level throughout the lifetime, then the premiums would have to go up dramatically at older ages. So this plan was designed, again, with the pension supplement theory behind it, to be a level premium over time. It includes a conversion option, very little employer and plan sponsor involvement. It's essentially designed to be a turnkey operation. If you were to offer this program, we'd need a little bit of assistance to roll it out in the beginning, and after that, the plan kind of runs itself. It includes domestic partners, civil unions, same-sex marriages, under the spouse coverage, depending on what the state law, a particular state law requires. And again, it pays in addition to any additional benefits. So this is not it doesn't carve out any benefit that the participant might get at his or her local jurisdiction. That benefit would be paid, and this would be paid on top of it. It also includes something that we added within the last 2 years is what's called the estate guidance benefit. That's really essentially a free will preparation benefit, simple will preparation. It's not a complicated one, but for people that want to simplify it or ease simple will, this program will provide that at no additional cost. This is a summary of the benefits of one of the two plan options available. I'll talk about what those two options are in just a minute, but this is essentially what we call the $16 plan. The plan has a $16 a month monthly premium, and you can see the nature of this. This shows you the declining term nature of the plan. Somebody under age 25 is eligible for life insurance benefit, assuming an accidental death of $325,000. And by the time you get to age 65, that benefit is reduced to $7,500. So the benefit, again, reduces with age, but the premium stays constant over time. And you can see on the far right column the spouse and the child benefits, which are included automatically in this program. We understand, particularly when considering whether to offer this program, we understand that the board has two constituencies. One are certainly your active members, which are very important, but you also have retirees that you are responsible for. And in designing this plan, the recognition that it may not be particularly perceived as particularly fair if this program was only available to active members. So the program is available to existing retirees on a one-time basis. When it's initially offered, existing retirees get an opportunity to enroll in the program. Again, guaranteed issue, no medical underwriting. So if somebody was 65 and retired, they would be eligible for that $7,500 benefit. That's only one time, because you can imagine retirees are a higher risk group, and we couldn't convince Prudential to offer the open enrollment to retirees every year. They thought that was a little too risky. But it is offered initially for the initial group. Anybody that has the program as an active employee can continue it into retiree indefinitely, and there's no maximum age limit. There are two options, as I mentioned, how this plan can be offered. One is what we call the $16 option, and that is if premiums are paid through payroll deduction or pension deduction. And for many, many years, that was the only option available up until about 4 or 5 years ago. We then began to realize that there were, for many reasons, it was difficult to get pension. Sometimes getting payroll deductions was difficult. Either there weren't enough payroll slots, or people just weren't in. Administratively, it was too difficult to do payroll deductions. So we developed a new product, a second product, which is what's called the Family Protection Plus benefit. I actually have a brochure here, and I think I sent an electronic version to Steve. That's a $17 plan. So there's two options. One is payroll deduction. The other is the direct payment by the employees. So under the $17 plan, the employee or the retiree would pay either by check or by bank withdrawal, and it would keep the retirement system or the local government entity out of the business of collecting premiums. In any event, the two programs are identical, virtually identical. There's a slight difference in the benefit schedules between the $16 and $17 plan, but all the other benefit provisions are exactly the same. Tried to summarize here why the LEOFF board might want to consider offering this program, which again is only available to NCPERS members. And as an NCPERS member, the board has the option or the ability to access this program. I think one that immediately comes to my mind is in this day and age of where it's difficult to maintain pension benefits, much less likely to even expand them. This is an opportunity for the board or to offer a new benefit to your members in a time where it's difficult to offer, even maintain existing benefits. So it's an opportunity to offer a new valuable benefit to your members. And again, there's no direct cost to the board, so it doesn't add anything to you, but it is a benefit that you can offer your members. Again, it helps the younger, your younger police, your public safety people that often don't have a particularly large accrued pension benefit at that time. This gives them really a supplemental benefit in the event that there's a death in the family. It provides more coverage for your sort of middle-aged people, and again for your retirees, it gives an option for them to get life insurance, a guaranteed issue, which most people in retirement, it's very difficult to get life insurance. It's turnkey. It's essentially easy for you to implement. We do all the heavy lifting. We've implemented many of these, so we know how to do it well. And the plan does include an implementation allowance to offset any indirect cost. Now, each public employer decides whether they can accept the implementation allowance, but it is built into the program to help sort of offset the indirect costs that are associated, staff time and everything, helping us get the program off the ground. So there is an allowance available. This gives you an example of who's offering the program today. There's 8 statewide programs listed, and in reviewing this in my hotel room last night, I realized that I left out one of the most recent ones. I updated the slide from one I did a couple years ago. So in addition to this group, in 2011, the Ohio Police and Fire State Retirement System began offering this program. So in terms of organizations that are parallel or somewhat similar to yours, the Arkansas Local Police and Fire Retirement System offer this plan in addition to the Ohio Police and Fire Retirement System. Then many general state retirement programs, such as Idaho PERSI, your neighbor next door, has offered this program for 30 or 40 years. And beginning early in 2014, we're rolling this out for 2 new plans, the Connecticut and Louisiana State Firefighters Association. So you can see the program is being offered to a number of statewide organizations similar to yours. To implement the plan is relatively straightforward. Obviously, we would need board approval to do that. The board would then need to decide which of the 2 options to offer, whether it be the $16, which is the payroll deduction option, or the $17, which does not require payroll deduction. Once we know that, we would put together an implementation plan, a schedule with you to roll this plan out. We would generally hope to be able to do 2 statewide mailings. That's not necessarily a given, but that's sort of in our ideal world. We'd like to be able to communicate this program twice before the open enrollment starts. The open enrollment would be done online for your active members. We do have the ability to do paper enrollment for retirees if you think that's best for your retiree members. Sometimes we found that using paper for retirees may be a benefit. Sometimes the group is so well-versed computer-wise that it's not necessary. Then we would mail evidence of coverage to your members. And then the program, after the initial open enrollment, you would pick the time that would be best for your membership. After that, there would be an annual open enrollment period, which all statewide plans have. This plan is opened once a year to everybody. We generally do that in the fall. New hires during the year would have the ability to enroll in the plan within 60 days. So we've got the enrollment process and the implementation process pretty well down, and it would have minimal impact on your staff to be able to roll this program out. So in a nutshell, that's the program and how it operates. And I'd be glad to answer any questions you might have of me or of NCPERS, and I'll attempt to answer them as best I can.
Yeah, Bill, one of the things that struck me here was when it's completely voluntary, do you have any indication of what the penetration is once you go into, say, like Arkansas or?
Good question. Yeah, when it's initially offered, generally the initial offering gets around a 5% penetration, and the plan kind of grows over time. Quite frankly, of that 5%, about 80% of those are retirees, because the retirees jump all over this in the beginning because, it's not often that they have the opportunity to get life insurance with no medical underwriting. That's understood. Prudential understands that. The plan is rated to sort of absorb that. But certainly the hope is over time in the plan, as we have annual open enrollments, the enrollment would grow. Idaho PERSI, for instance, the penetration is about 15 to 18%, and they've had the program for about 30 years. So it sort of maxes out at 20%, but if we can get 5% in the initial open enrollment, we're all pretty pleased.
Has there ever been any thought to what the rates would be if you got everybody, if it was just offered as a benefit of the pension plan? I mean, is that...
Funny you should ask that. You and I were at a meeting this week with NCPERS, and I stayed over on Monday and met with the Miami Firefighters Association, and they are seriously considering offering as a union benefit, and in which case the the options to them will be if they want to mirror the NCPERS plan design, then they will either get an increased benefit schedule or a reduced premium. So they're going to have to decide which of those they want, because if we can get 100% of the group, obviously the adverse selection risk goes away. And in the plan, the premiums are much too rich for that type of plan. So in that particular situation, it would be either improving the benefit schedule dramatically or reducing the premium. The employer would, plan sponsor would have a choice which of those two to do.
Is Prudential had any opportunity to price something like that out?
We're doing that right now for Miami.
Okay.
We needed the census. We had to get the census of the group. To offer it on a voluntary basis, we don't need a census because we don't. It doesn't do us any good. But if it's on a mandatory basis, then in order for them to rate it, they need the census. They need to know the age and sex and retirement status of people. So we should have that information for the Miami firefighters within the next 2 weeks. So.
Okay. Any other questions? David?
Just wondering what the cost for implementation is for the payroll deductions. It sounds like that's the preferred alternative for the agencies that you're asking to add that to their work.
Well, it's really hard for me to estimate. What it would require would be, I suspect, I don't know how your agency operates, but let's take Idaho retirement system, for instance. They obviously have to collect retirement funds from their individual participating employers. The city of Boise has to make a contribution to and they have to set up a mechanism where each employer adds a payroll deduction slot for this plan. So I can't estimate the actual cost, but I'm sure there are some. There really are, and that is why why the non-payroll deduction option has been, quite frankly, the only thing we've sold since 2005 because it's just too difficult for people to get payroll deductions set up nowadays. So that really is much more common to have the direct payment option. And that plan also has the implementation allowance built into it. The implementation allowance is $6 per individual to help offset indirect cost.
Go ahead.
And just wondering about, compared to lots of different companies sell life insurance, is just how do these rates or benefits compare to other people who provide this?
Good question. And, as close as I can to answer that, I can answer with two situations. One, this program was rolled out for the Illinois State Retirement System, state employees in 2005. And in order to introduce the plan, their legal counsel needed to determine whether or not it was unique enough that they could offer it on a sole source basis. Their legal counsel, in looking at the plan, determined that it was. I don't know. Obviously, that may not apply to you, but what they found was unique was the fact that it's the decreasing term combined with the spouse benefit and the child benefit. They could find no comparable plan in the marketplace. We were asked the same thing. This plan was introduced to the Dallas Police and Fire Retirement System 3 years ago, and that was the same issue that their legal counsel brought up. And they did their research and came back and said, yeah, we can't find any comparable plan. So you can find pieces of this plan any place, but all rolled into one, one consolidated plan. At least those two organizations felt it was unique enough that they could offer it on a sole source basis.
Right. Senator?
No, is that we do payroll deductions and we offer life insurance to all our employees already. So that's a whole conversation we'll have with the board here about just, why this is on our agenda today. But I don't know what that cost is. There is that initial cost. There's that constant thing. I'm just thinking about all the employers and the additional costs that we have for one more benefit. That we'd love to provide additional benefits, but it does come at a cost, and those costs come directly from resources that are available to our members. So it's a cost benefit about where we spend our time and energy. The initial part is really the initial setup of a new payroll, getting it on into those different things. But I don't know what that additional cost would be.
And that is why, quite frankly, why we rolled out the second option, because we were hearing that quite often. And the second option would keep individual cities and governmental units out of the premium business altogether. The individuals would pay directly. So,
Senator?
If you chose the option that would put the premium payment on the individual members, the $17 plan, then the startup costs would be primarily associated with a mailing. The idea would be that some kind of mailing would go out, perhaps in conjunction with one of the board's newsletters as an insert, or some kind of article in the newsletter itself, and so there'd be some costs associated with that initial outreach, and then after that, it would all be between the members and the retirees and the insurance company directly, and we'd be out of it with the exception of, again, potentially these annual updates about the open enrollment and stuff that would also be included in a newsletter. That type of stuff we'd have to get more info on, and there's no, again, as I should have said by way of reminder, this was an item that the board asked to have on the agenda at the last meeting. This is sort of the first step, so there's no expectation that you would take final action on anything today. If you were to desire additional information, you would ask us to sort of sort out some of these things and bring back a follow-up or a next stage type of presentation, which would be next interim session.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to point out that Mr. Nelson brings up a good point. The mailing cost and printing, all that would be absorbed by the plan, by us. We would not expect the retirement system to pay any of that. So I failed to point that out. So those are all expenses that would be incurred by us during the implementation process.
Okay.
Okay.
Anything further? All right, Bill, well, thank you for making the trip up and making the presentation.
Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays to all of you.
You as well. Okay, I'd like to ask, I know we got a late start here, but just a 5-minute recess here to use the facilities, grab a cup of coffee. So just 5 minutes is all we need. Okay, we'll be in recess.
Career change issue that the board has been discussing this interim. As Paul gets ready to begin, I need to make a couple of quick announcements. The first is that there has been a request from the Associated Press for an audio file of all of the discussion surrounding the career change proposal. So I just wanted to let you guys know that we'll be providing that, but any discussion or comments will go to the AP. I just didn't want you to be, caught off guard with that. The second thing is I'd originally, I was asked to meet with the mayor of the city of DuPont prior to this meeting to discuss this issue. Unfortunately, that meeting had to be rescheduled, and so I'm now scheduled to talk with him and some of his staff tomorrow. I thought that if I'd had a chance to talk with them before this meeting that I might be able to provide some additional insight, but in any event, that meeting did not take place but is scheduled for tomorrow, and I'll let you know how it goes. With that, Paul, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Paul Neal, legal counsel, and here on the fourth presentation on career change. We talked about this before in August, September, and then again in November. And sort of the horns of the dilemma, if you will, is two different policy angles that are, while not mutually exclusive, at least a little inconsistent, which is the underlying idea of allowing retirees to come back to work, which is you've got folks that may have aged out of line duty but still have years ahead of them of productive work and have some valuable skills. As a 53-year-old, I like to think that I've got a few good years left in me. And okay, and the other issue, though, is the public problem with someone getting a pension and a paycheck at the same time. And we know that the pension comes out of a different pot, and it's really not double dipping, but it is a real issue, as we saw last spring. So at the last meeting, Board Member Klein had asked for some background on what the other systems are doing. And as I looked at that, I realized that just a snapshot of where we're at today wouldn't really tell the story. I went back to starting with the original Plan 2 statutes, and I've kind of gone through that, and I'll try to run through this fairly quickly. In 1977, when the Plan 2s, LEOFF, PERS, and TERS were all created, they took a real hard line on post-retirement employment. It was if you have any service for a public employer, it's non-federal, your pension is suspended. So anything, there's no minimum amount workable or anything like that. Now, of course, that was 1977, and brand new systems, and the prospect of any post-retirement employment was far off in the distance at that time. The next time the legislature looked at it was in 1990, and recognizing that there was some interest in allowing some ability for retirees to work because of the valuable skills they'd learned during their careers. And the line the legislature drew at that point was to say, well, as long as you're working and it's not enough to put you into an eligible position, that's okay. That meant different things in PERS, TERS, and LEOFF, obviously, but that was sort of where they drew the line. And that was, at that point, LEOFF, PERS, and TERS were all the same. In 93, DRS did rules that defined what it meant to actuary to recompute the benefit when somebody stopped working and started drawing their pension again. Then in 1997, got ahead of myself, this was a bill that was originally sponsored by the Department of Retirement Systems, and it was trying to sort of bring some consistency to a lot of different issues, including the definition of separation from service. When does somebody become a retiree? How long do they have to be gone before they can come back? How much can they come back? Now, this bill did not have much to do with LEOFF. The only thing this bill did with LEOFF 2 is define separation from service, but it did talk about the ability of PERS and TERS retirees to come back, and they said they could come back for up to 5 months at that time. And in both PERS and TERS, it made it so that return to membership was optional. So if you came back to work, even if you came back to work in an eligible position and your pension stopped, you were not mandated back into membership. That was an option, and that's a difference from LEOFF, because in LEOFF law, which was not changed in this bill, if you came back to a full-time law enforcement officer or firefighter position, you are mandated into membership, even if you're a retiree. Then in 2001, the pendulum kind of went as far as it was going to go on the right-hand side, and it really didn't change things for Plan 2 people. This bill, again, didn't have anything to do with LEOFF. But again, this is just sort of give you the context of what the other plans were doing. This is where the 867 hours came from. It was 5 months before that. You've probably heard the 867 hours. That just was taking 5 months and converting it into number of hours. But the legislature did say, well, we have this need to be able to access these experienced Plan 1 retirees. So they had, of course, had a lower retirement age. And so they put it in and said you can work up to 1,500 hours per year as a Plan 1 retiree, which is about 9 months, roughly. And at that point, your pension stops, but then it starts again the next January. It was 1,500 hours a calendar year. The original bill, interesting to me anyway, the original bill had a expiration date, because the whole policy was this is something we need. We're seeing shortages in the school districts and in some of the political subs, and so they had a expiration date on it. I believe it was 2004, might have been 2006. The governor, when he signed the bill, vetoed the expiration dates. So he made it so that these heightened levels of ability to work would go on indefinitely. Some of you may remember there were some examples in the newspaper where that did not work out too well. So the legislature came back and placed some pretty significant conditions on getting to the 1,500 hours. You had to, work for an employer who would show that there was no one else available, and there had to be set policies. And then they also put in a lifetime cap. And again, both of these things were in response to, throwing the net kind of wide, and then some of the blowback that came from that. In 2005, it's not on this chart because it's really not return to work. It's the LEOFF 2 return to work rules. Because at this point, everything from 97 on was really just PERS and TERS. So LEOFF at this time was in the same position it had been in 1990. So then the career change bill came in 2005, which said, well, if you come back to work in an eligible PERS or TERS position, you can opt not to join the new system and continue to receive your pension while you're working. It's that career change idea. Then in 2011, the most recent thing to happen on the return to work is the pendulum has now come back to the middle, what looks like the middle for now anyway, and returned to the 1997 standard. Essentially, the legislature came in 2011 and said, the original conditions that led to us expanding the eligibility, we don't really have a shortage of employees like that anymore. Given the current economic situation, we're going to have the opposite. So they went back to the 97 standard. So that's kind of the scope of where things have gone over the last almost 23 years, 24 years. So with that in mind, the board asked staff to come back with a couple of options for this meeting. One would be to close the ability to allow post-retirement employment in LEOFF positions and still draw your LEOFF salary. And again, those were the situations we've seen or talked about where someone will come in and be working part-time but pretty close to full-time in a job that has traditionally been a LEOFF position. But if it's not full-time, then it's not eligible for LEOFF. There was also some interest in looking at a way to allow limited post-retirement employment in LEOFF positions. The last presentation, I talked about that some. There are some complications inherent in that administratively. So what I looked at is the option one would be to propose legislation, and I believe there's some draft, an early preliminary draft of a bill that could do this, to suspend LEOFF 2 retirement if the duties of the retiree's position would qualify for LEOFF. Were those duties full-time, fully compensated? And when we talked about this before, there were two different ways that this was being worked. One is to say, well, they're not full-time, like this was like the DuPont situation. There was an article in the paper that's also included in your materials where there were some people who were not fully compensated, and there was some question about, well, what does that mean exactly? And a lot of discussion around that. There's a third example where someone will be in what's traditionally been a LEOFF position, but they'll add some non-LEOFF duties, like have the Director of Public Works report to them or something like that. And I think that would kind of go into the full-time question. So if the option one, if that's what the board wanted to do, subject to your direction, would be to take the draft bill we've got now, work it a little bit to make sure that we covered that third possibility if that's what the board wants to do, and then have that available if the board wanted to propose that to the legislature. The second option, this allowing limited post-retirement employment, what he looked at is, in some conversations with the department about what they could actually administer. The 867 hours, which is what they're doing for for PERS and TERS right now, that would be, I don't want to say easy, but at least easier. They wouldn't have to create a whole new program. They've got some ways to do that. So this would really convert career change into retire rehire. It would really be a change in the career change policy. If you were going to do that, there's a little bit of a disconnect because, as I was talking about earlier, in PERS and TERS, if you retire and then come back to work, even if your pension stops, you're not mandated back into membership. It's an optional thing. Right now in LEOFF law, membership is mandatory. So if you were going to go this option, you would probably want, if you wanted to make it consistent, I should say, you would want to have that membership after retirement, return to membership be optional as well. So with that, those are the two options at front at this point. So any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Also, not to head off questions but before anybody has a or interest or possibility of there being a motion, there is a request for public testimony on this particular issue as well. So I just wanted to mention that to the board.
Having said that, the plan will be as soon as, if you have any questions for Paul, go ahead and ask those now, and then we'll have our guest that would like to speak come up next. We could always recall Paul for questions if something comes up as well. All right, no questions for now, Paul, so Mark, if you'd like to come on up, please introduce yourself for the record.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow board members. My name is Mark Langford. I'm a retired Tacoma Police Department captain. I retired January 1st of this year after 32 and a half years of service. And as a note to that, I was not really planning to retire at that time. I still felt I had a significant contribution to make to law enforcement, but the city was facing budget problems. They were going to lay off 13 police officers and a number of firefighters. So they crafted instead an incentive, which I and 16 of my colleagues looked at and decided to take, and we ended up retiring. So it was a little unexpected for me. However, after having the last 11 and a half months in retirement, my batteries have kind of recharged a little bit. And I found myself here in the middle of this discussion about career change via the city of Milton in Pierce County reaching out to me. I was not actively looking to go back to work or seek a position or get involved in this, but they needed somebody to be interim police chief in their city. The current chief of 7 years is retiring, and they're going to start a search process for a permanent chief through the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs. I've accepted a temporary position with them, and I told them that maybe I could be full-time as long as I wasn't a fully commissioned officer, more like a civilian director of public safety or something, because I was aware of some of the implications. I didn't want to give up my pension. But they are a small department, and they wanted somebody who could still have commissioned authority. They have a total of 13 officers in the department for a community of 7,000 residents. So I guess pretty much after the standards set through DuPont, they asked me to take a temporary position, which meant 34 hours a week. And I was told that the search for the new chief might take as long as 6 months. And so I also was confirmed with that through Mitch Barker, who's the head of the Washington Association of Sheriffs and Police Chiefs, that's typically it takes at least that long. So I'm here before the board today to just put a kind of a face and a name to the scenario that this issue is addressing. And I wanted to, I guess, not make any specific recommendation. I think you're tasked with a pretty challenging issue to come up with a proposal that the legislature would accept and would be in the best interest of the citizens of the state of Washington. But as you know, we can't always look at history. As our analysts pointed out, when they crafted the law that allowed teachers to come back to work after retirement, it was due to a shortage. And I think we might be missing out on some valuable expertise here in the state of Washington by not having a way for our executives and supervisors from larger agencies to be able to help small communities when they need either an interim chief or a permanent chief to lead their departments. So my one concern was that maybe the cap of the 867 hours might be a little bit too limited in helping a city hire an interim chief to be able to search for the permanent chief. And that's the one comment I bring forward. I would like to say to the board that you have my immense gratitude for your service. I think we're all here because we have a servant heart. You're giving your time here. And I enjoyed very much my time as an active member of WACOPS, Washington Council of Police and Sheriffs, and was down here with the legislative body for the last 10 years of my career. So I have a great appreciation. I wanted to say thank you for that, and just mention that unknowingly I found myself in the middle of this discussion, and I am here with the support of my employer, the City of Milton, because I seem to be the candidate that they needed at the time to fill their need. So thank you very much, and that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions or comments for Mark? All right. Thank you. Okay, are there any further questions for Mr. Neal here regarding the presentation? Matt?
My question is related to Mark's issue. How does option one affect that type of position where an individual works less than 40 hours a week? Is that considered part-time? Does that meet the intent of closing the loophole in option one, but also allowing employment?
Under option one, if you were doing what were traditionally law enforcement officer or firefighter duties, even if you were part-time or less than fully compensated, your pension would still be suspended under option one.
So you'd return to membership under option one. So in the case of Mark, he would have the choice of continuing on as interim police chief, but having his pension suspended, and returning to membership, accumulating some additional service credit and so forth, and then eventually retiring or separating from employment.
Oh, Senator?
Just a comment. The session is over mid-March, and then legislation generally is 30 days after that unless the governor signs it early.
All right.
The point being that there'd be no change for those for that period
In the
of time.
current circumstance, yes. Paul, I guess I'm more asking for validation than asking a question here, but in this particular case, it seems to me there's clearly a separation between what we want to try to accomplish with option one and this notion of what we do about I can't remember Mark's terminology, but supervisors and folks from larger jurisdictions that can go into their smaller jurisdictions and help out. And that's a concern that a number of us have discussed, I think, a few times about, a guy can come from Boise, Idaho and do it, but if he comes from Tacoma, Washington, he can't. And that's an issue that's separate from what we want to try to accomplish here, which is the maintenance of a career change proposal that we had intended to cover the ability for an otherwise serviceable person to go to less onerous or strenuous work after they finish their career as a law enforcement officer, as a firefighter. And I think the example I recall when we passed this bill was a law enforcement officer that can go and be a bailiff in King County or something like that. That's my recollection of what the intent of career change was initially. And there's been uncovered here a couple of anomalies, loopholes, if you will, that threaten the career change bill in its entirety, and in fact, in some ways, could end up replacing career change with something different than that. I think that's what we saw in the last year or two, and Steve, I guess I can look at you as well, that we've been threatened with, our career change, if it exists the way it is today, looks more like retire, rehire in a lot of people's opinion, even though it's not. The opinion, public opinion in particular, is that it is, even though it isn't close to retire, rehire. But if there are some unintended consequences here and loopholes, it starts to move in that direction. Is that a fair characterization, or?
That's a fair summary of the way this issue was framed by the editorial board at the Daily Olympian when they called for a repeal of the career change program in its entirety.
So again, we had a guest come and talk to us here today, and I think that issue is something that we could explore here at this board, correct? We can talk about how we either compete or how we maintain. I'd rather have somebody from Tacoma than from, Flagstaff, Arizona, continue the work here. They know the statutes in the state of Washington. They're familiar with whether it's collective bargaining or whether it's any other Washington administrative code that relates to law enforcement and the enforcement of laws in the state of Washington. It just doesn't make sense that we would take somebody from outside the state who has little experience as opposed to somebody in state based on the fact that they retired in the system. Senator?
Question, Paul. Do we have any indication of other people on the department that would be qualified? Now, the reason I ask that, I came from a 11-man, 2-women department. The captain became chief, and so are we looking at who is available to fill these positions without retire, rehire?
No, we have not looked at that, about what the overall pool is of available people to promote.
Mark? Okay, any other questions for Mr. Neal? Okay, pleasure of the board. Mark?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we move forward with option number 1.
Okay. Moved and seconded to move forward with option number 1. And Steve, if you could just give us a real quick, what does that mean? And generally speaking, I know the senator mentioned something about if we had a bill like option 1 that passed, it would be 4 months, 5 months perhaps before it's becomes law. Yeah.
That's typical. The bill wouldn't have an emergency clause, so it would become effective either 30 days after session or 30 days after the governor's signature, if the governor signs it, after the close of regular session. So that would be the kind of a rough idea of the timing of the bill.
Okay. Right, any other comments?
Just the intent of that was, I was here when we proposed that and that passed the legislature. The intent of that original career change bill was clear. It was meant as a career change bill. I think the other issues, while they may merit some discussion in the future, we need to limit ourselves to this particular issue. And it was clear, either collect your pension, which if you worked another public employee job in the state of Washington, and not enroll in a new plan and accrue new service credit, or not collect your pension and enroll in the new plan and collect service credit for that particular plan. It wasn't intended. The loophole that's occurred in some certain very few instances was never intended by that original bill, and I look at this as just a way to close that loophole and ensure that the original intent of that legislation is carried forward.
Okay. Further discussion? Okay, seeing and hearing none, please use your, Pat?
I support that too, to address the career change bill with the intent we had when we passed it originally, but also I intend to support looking into further to take care of the issue of people that want to continue employment, but I think it's separate from this career change bill.
Okay.
I'm going to agree with Pat. I feel very strongly about putting individuals who have the experience level and they have the expertise to move into a smaller agency for those communities and give them the opportunity to have qualified leadership for those communities to be able to advance their local agendas, and to have somebody like Mark representing the police department and police services. You won't find a better guy.
Okay. Senator?
Well, I too support the motion before us, and the reason being I've been around for at least 3 of those changes in the legislature, and I've seen it operate in the public schools where you have, to me, they abused the system and they rehired principals instead of bringing someone up through the ranks that is qualified and ready to serve. And I just think there are too many problems, and the perception is it's double dipping or whatever, and we all know that perception is reality, and I think the press will play against us if we don't support this. So thank you.
Okay. All right, further discussion? Seeing and hearing none, go ahead and go to your iPad for the vote. And the motion carries.
Yes. By way of brief introduction, this is an issue that the board asked in November to be brought back for a final presentation. It's something you've been had a number of hearings on over the interim. There were a couple of different options that you were still interested in exploring, and Paul will kind of outline those choices for you today. That I'll turn it over to Paul.
All right, thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, again for the record, my name is Paul Neal, committee staff. And as Steve mentioned, we're following up on earlier presentations about enhancing abilities to save for retirement. At the November 20th meeting, the board directed staff to come up with, to put together 3 options for vote. These options are not mutually exclusive. You can do any or all of these. Option 1 is to authorize Left Plan 2 to annuitize savings, make it into an annuity at time of retirement, much like the airtime or purchase of service credit benefit, but without the limitation, without the maximum limitation. We're keeping the numbering from earlier presentations, which is why it goes from option 1 to option 3. Requiring DRS's deferred compensation program to be offered to all LEFF members. There are some employers that don't do that at this time. And option 4 was to have the board write to DRS requesting them to exercise their authority to offer a Roth option for the existing 457 plan. Option 1 is authorizing that annuitization of rollovers of tax-deferred savings. This is basically at time of retirement. If you have a 457 plan, you can roll it over into the Left 2 and then annuitize it through the Left 2 system, which, as we talked about in earlier presentations, gives you essentially a better return, a better annuity program. We have a bill draft in the materials that sets that up. Basically, the way it was set up in the bill draft, in order to make it as administrable as possible, is to just have it have the same features of the annuitization that DRS already does for PERS and for all the Plan 3s. So they've got a, they know how to do that. So this is basically plugging into that existing ability. There is a draft fiscal note from the Office of State Actuary, and they're saying it's written to be actuary equivalent, so they're not identifying a cost. With the caveat, as anytime you have any kind of an ongoing thing, or ongoing program, the no cost assumes that the future assumptions are right. And so if the assumptions turn out to be not conservative enough, there could potentially be a cost. On the same token, if the assumptions turn out to be too conservative, there could actually be a benefit to the plan. But all that goes in.
Well, on that subject there, I mean, that's not inconsistent with what we see currently with different assumptions, correct?
That's always the case, certainly, yeah.
So it's not any different than that. I mean, they'll take a look at the survivor annuity. We had the recent changes there, and purchase of the 5-year purchase. Those were just recently modified, correct?
That's true, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that is always the case with any kind of because you're always looking into the future and nobody actually knows what the future is going to be. So this would require a motion, and it would require a bill to do this. Option 3 is require LEOFF employers to offer DRS deferred compensation program to LEOFF members. That we looked at that earlier. Essentially, the administrative costs are significantly lower for the DRS program. That would require draft legislation, which has been submitted to DRS and OSA for review. Some employers have expressed some concern about the mandate. There's a potential conflict. Some of these employers have exclusivity agreements with the people who are currently doing their 457 plans, and I think they kind of just don't like being told what to do also. So it's an issue there. I mean, it's currently an option that's available to them. So there has been some concern about that. And that would require, again, a bill and a motion. One thing we looked at, and I wanted to add this, we didn't have this before, DRS had just put together some data about who are the political subdivision employers who are not currently in the deferred compensation plan. There's 327 total employers. Almost 40% of them have 5 or less employees, and then it kind of goes up from there. But you can see there's a big chunk of them that are pretty small employers. On the other end of the spectrum, some of the largest employers are not participating either. King County, Pierce County, Snohomish County, City of Tacoma, Spokane County. So you've kind of got both bookends of the spectrum on there. You've got the really small employers who are not participating. Some of the largest employers are not participating. So that's the people that would be affected if you wanted to go ahead with this option.
Paul, can I ask you on this pie chart here? I'm trying to see the colors here. So it's 5 or less is the 39%, and then it goes clockwise after that?
Right. So if you looked at a little bit over 50% is less than 15. If you added the blue piece and the orange, or maybe that's burnt sienna, I don't know.
Okay. So, and that's there's 327 employers that are participating.
That are not participating. These are the employers that are not.
That are not.
Right.
Huh.
Oh.
Go ahead, David.
Can you explain this chart some more? I'm not sure what that not participating or is participating actually means for an individual city.
It means that
or employer. I mean,
these are the political subdivisions that DRS has identified who are not currently participating in their deferred compensation program in Washington. So there's 327, and a lot of these are little tiny, one employee places, and then some of the larger ones. But this is just kind of a snapshot of the folks who are not participating. These are the folks that, were you to do a bill, would be required to start offering that program they're not currently offering.
I can follow up. So like King County, an employer that I know of since I used to work with them, so they offer 3 different types of deferred comp. You can put it in Plan A, B, or C, and you're saying that they would be in that, they would be included in this because they don't have this deferred comp program as one of their options currently.
That's correct.
That's correct. So they may be providing it in a different way, but this would require them to layer this on top of what they currently provide.
Right. This would be an additional 457 option for their employees.
Do we have information about those who don't provide any deferred comp to their employers?
No, I don't have information on people that don't provide any at all.
So 327 aren't. How many are? Is that a future slide here? I didn't.
No, I don't have that slide. I'm going to turn around and look at Dave Nelson. Are participating.
Our total DRS employers, of which only 327 of those 1315
Are not.
offer the DCP program.
So almost 1,000 are in,
Right.
or are at least as an option.
Right.
Interesting. Okay. Mark?
Do all those employers have left to employees? Because as I understand it, the scope of what we're discussing is, the bill that we're discussing is exclusive to or employers that employ left Plan 2 employees.
That's correct.
That's correct. Of the 1,300, I'm sorry, Dave Nelson for the record, Department of Retirement Systems. Of the 1,315 employers, there's roughly 5 left employers included. Not sure how many of the 327 that don't participate are also left employers. There are a number of small fire districts, and as Paul mentioned, some of the larger employers so those would be left employers, but some of our bigger employers, King County, Clark County, left employers that do not.
This may not be a question you can answer, so bear with me here while I say this, but why would a small employer not take advantage of this? I mean, where else are they going to go? So what are they doing if they're not doing, the plan that's out there that's readily available to them? I mean, if you're 15 or less, I can't imagine that the economies of scale would allow you to do anything on your own. So do we know what they're doing?
We don't. I mean, our folks go out and they try and talk and market to others. There are some other companies that do offer these kind of plans to small employers. So there are other 457 providers that are out there that some of these small employers may offer. Many times it's just a choice given the limited number of employees they have and investment options that an individual can do on them. They just don't.
Okay. David?
So a follow-up to that. So there's nothing, you're telling me that there's almost 1,000 organizations that currently voluntarily have this as one of their options, right?
Essentially, all state agencies are required.
Okay.
But all the other employers, all the other political sub-school districts opted into the program.
Right. But there's nothing that's, except if they've made some exclusivity requirements, but if I went to city X or county Y or fire district B, they can, there's nothing in state law that's either, I mean, that discourages, or they could do that right now. They could do this right now.
They meet all the requirements. They can offer the way to report the information to the department they already have built, because they have to do that. Creatively, they already have the infrastructure to be able to.
It's just a follow-up to Kelly's point, is that I'm looking at that 39%, and I've worked for those kind of small organizations, and have we marketed to those small organizations? Often it's time, energy, resources that a lot of these places don't even have an HR department. I've been clerk, treasurer, put all the different hats on. That would be a great marketing. Is just that they may not be aware, and I would think that it's in a lot of our smaller communities that would be a great resource if they, maybe they don't know, or they have other options available to them. I mean, that's one thing I'm concerned about. The 327 doesn't tell you some of those larger organizations you're talking about, Tacoma, King County. They've chosen a different path, and they obviously have the staff and resources to look at those things. But it's really those small organizations I'd be interested about making sure that, do they know about it? Is there cost that's a concern on theirs? I don't know.
As far as their concerns, I couldn't tell you. As far as do they know about it, the department does have a marketing program, and we have reached out to all public employers time or another to explain the benefits of the plan.
I would be, but Mark's comment about just how many of these are left to employers, if I was to do that chart again, to find out, are there other options? I mean, I think a key thing that I've heard from the board is we want to make sure that there are options available to our members. And so I'd like to that would be great to find out. Are our members across the state allowed, do they have these options available to whatever organization that they are in? That would be interesting to me.
Paul, is future slides here going to talk about fee structures and things like that?
Actually, we talked about that before. The slide program here is just kind of motivated more towards decisions. So I think the next slide actually goes on to the next option.
Okay, and so I want to bring that up here because I know, and Mark and Pat, I mean, we work for employers that have multiple options for deferred compensation. But when I looked at this, some of the material earlier, and looked at DRS's website, I don't know how anybody could compete with what they're doing, including our own International Association of Firefighters Financial Corporation, who provides 457 services. It is an option in the city of Olympia, for example, along with ICMA. I know other providers, at least in the fire side, employers, Aetna and ING. So, I mean, I know they're out there, but not a one of them can match the fee structure with the DRS program here. And so that's where I think is, as an option, I think it's the best thing for our members is to, particularly when we're talking about the objectives here of providing opportunities for saving. We just went to a course in Ontario at the University of Toronto that said 100 basis points difference, so 1% difference in fees, could increase your savings or your earnings by 20% over your career. I mean, it's remarkable the amount of money just from 1% difference, and I think that's probably about the difference on these. So I know we all have trade associations, if you will, whether it's the IFF or ICMA that offer services, and there may be some exclusivity agreements with relation to that. But I think I don't know what the scope we can do here. If we're only saying that we can speak to LEOFF employers with this one of the options here, I would like to see us explore that. I mean, I don't know how much say we can have over the other 700 employers, but with LEOFF employers, it seems to me this would be a natural to at least make an opportunity available for our members to participate. And
follow up on that, if I may, Mr. Chairman, just to refresh the board's memory about the kind of the differences in the costs. The cost for the DRS deferred comp program is 0.13%. And part of the difficulty in making the comparison is the fee structures are a little variable. And so doing the best job we could do in terms of getting a sense for where they were at in the market, it was about an average of about 1.3%. So you've got like a 1.1% difference between what DCP can do versus what you're going to get from a private administrator. So the kind of differences that the chairman was talking about are very much on the table here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thanks, Dave.
And so moving on to option 4. That's and this is something that came up in the last board meeting. The tax law was changed fairly recently to allow governmental 457 plans to offer Roth options. DRS has that authority. There's no need for a bill to do that. And a draft letter would be something that the board had expressed some interest in. That's included as Appendix G. It's a very drafty letter. And that would, again, require a motion. So that's the last slide I have. If there's any questions. What I will do, seeing none, is go back to the slide that kind of lays out the options, just for sort of a summary.
All these options are not mutually exclusive.
That's correct. You could do any or all of these.
Okay, is there any further questions for Paul? I guess we could have let you get to the end of it before we started asking all those questions, but.
You're the board.
All right, no questions. Okay, are there any pleasure of the board to do anything, or? Oh, I'm sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I move that we move forward with option 3 exclusive of the other two.
Okay. Is there a second? Second. All right, moving to seconded. Discussion. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm concerned about the impact on the smaller agencies and departments, and so I'll be voting no on this. Thank you.
David, then Mark.
Again, I will be voting no. I've made it very clear that I think requiring especially small agencies, I think, is a terrible idea, and it's unfortunate this board has already. I'm concerned that staff has already drafted legislation, and I don't think that we authorized legislation to be done on this option. I feel like this proposal has gone before us at a much faster pace than I was expecting. We still don't have all this information. I heard some conversations about how many left to memberships. I don't even have that information. I don't know how many agencies are being impacted by this. And I look at 40% of very small agencies, and having worked in those small agencies, requiring additional mandates that are not funded, that have not been asked, have not been talked to them, I think is not a good way for this board to proceed. Making this a voluntary, they can do this right now. There is nothing that is making them that they cannot do this. It may not be that they just don't know about it. I think it's a marketing issue. If the numbers are so great, then why wouldn't we just go out there and ask them? I think we need to hear from those smaller agencies, and you're requiring very large agencies, too, who have full staff. They've looked at this. Any time that we require one sort of place, I think that we have put ourselves into saying that this is the only way. I think this is a voluntary option. I think that's great. It actually seems like more than 75% of agencies already provide this. I don't see the hurry to do this at this point. So I'll be voting no.
Mark?
I think what's happening at the present time is those agencies that don't offer this, and there's not, say you could have 100% of the employees represented in Left Plan 2 in these agencies, and they may want this option. But the employer is under no obligation to fulfill the wishes of the majority of its employees, even if they wanted to do that. And I think that because, as fiduciaries of this plan, we have a legal responsibility to manage this plan for the exclusive benefit of plan participants and the beneficiaries, then we ought to allow this. And if you analyze the economic benefit of having this as an option, and we're not, this proposal doesn't mandate that any individual participate in this. It just mandates that it's an option for all those people, so it includes the freedom of choice for each individual to participate in this or not. And if you look at the analysis that's been done by the staff on this, the difference in the benefit over the lifetime of an individual, all costs being equal, is dramatic. And I think that we have an obligation to do what's in the best economic interests of the plan participants and their beneficiaries. And I think that this is a way that we have to fulfill that responsibility. We don't have an obligation to support either any sort of a vendor with respect to this, whether that vendor is the International City Managers Association, or whether it's the nationwide plan that partners with the International Association of Firefighters. Our obligation is to the plan participants and the beneficiaries. And I think this proposal goes a long way towards fulfilling that obligation and enhancing the economic future of our members. And I'm looking at the staff report on page 6, and if you look at the comparative annuity purchases, there's 4 different options there, 4 different mixes. You go from the private administrator and private annuity purchase, and these are all of those other variables being the same. The lifetime benefit is $365. If you look at the other end, the DRS administered and left 2 annuity purchase, the benefit is $578 for the same cost. That's a difference of $213 per month over somebody's lifetime, and I think that's pretty dramatic. So I'm going to speak in favor of that.
One point of clarification. I understood your motion to not include the annuitization piece of option 1, that your motion was just option 3 on its own. Was that?
Yes.
Okay.
Just a quick question for, I guess, both Dave, because you have that context, and the senator here. It seems we just have brought up both the DRS administered and the annuity purchase at the same time. An annuity purchase, I guess, would be option 1 here. What would be, as a comparison, your response to option 1?
Yeah, I don't know all the details on option 1. I think that one is specifically within our plan, how members use that. I don't foresee a problem right now with what I know on option 1 or option 4. Those are things that are specific about how does it work for our LEOFF Plan 2 members. And what I'm hearing on option 1 is, maybe Paul, you can join in, is that the state is allowing that with, is that other options at PERS 3? Is that what you're saying?
In PERS 3 and TERS 3, the members have a defined contribution account, and DRS already has a mechanism for annuitizing that account. So that's an already existing capability.
And so back to your comment, Mr. Hawley, is that I think authorizing an option, and I hear options, authorizing, it doesn't require. I'm fine with those. I'm fine with options. It's just that first word, require, mean across all departments. That's where it gets to be kind of I'd have to go into my membership to find out what that really is going to mean to all these. You'd be mandating to 327 organizations that we have not heard from. That concerns me.
Senator?
Yeah, I would concur with David's comments that options are desirable rather than required. And my question is, shouldn't if we're going to require it, shouldn't that be subject to the collective bargaining agreement and not need to require this type of legislation?
I do not know whether the 457 coverage options are part of the collective bargaining agreement or not. There may be people on the table
They are. That's something that could be bargained. And to also clarify earlier, the part of the board's policies is anytime there's a final option, it includes bill language. So that's the reason why bill language was drafted, is that's a standard practice for all final proposals. With respect to this particular option was asked to be brought forward by the board to deal with this issue of, for whatever reason, some employers are not offering the state program, and the possibility then would be to require that they do. And anyway, just to clarify.
Jack?
Having just finished up our negotiations with our employer, one of the things that we've been haggling with them about for a number of contracts is the Roth option. The Roth option cost absolutely nothing of the employer. It's all employee responsibility. And I think it'll lead into the senator's question. It was a contractual negotiation issue that we got into. The members of LEOFF 2 are starting to realize that there is no golden ring out there to grab as the merry goes around, and you need to start developing your own and paying for it with your own money. And that's one of the ways to do it. In addition to that, the annualization of the savings is another option that obviously the closer you get to retirement, the more beneficial it seems to you to have more control over what's happening with your retirement savings or your 457 or whatever you may be involved in. So I guess my thought on that is the more options you offer the employee, if it doesn't cost the employer anything, and to be honest with you, if a 457 plan or a deferred comp plan, if the employer's getting a kickback and they're not going to get their kickback, that's tough. I don't care. I care about the officer or the firefighter getting the full benefit of whatever he can get from his plan without paying a bunch of exorbitant fees. So from that position, I'd like to see option 1 and option 4 as an amendment to your motion. If you can do that.
Well, is there a second to that amendment, to add options 1 and 4 to the motion?
I'd second that.
Okay, moved and seconded. Senator?
Just a question, how's that going to work?
You'd have to vote on the motion to amend first.
No, I meant, well,
Oh,
understand that,
I
but
see.
how those three work together. We're going to require something, and then we're going to make two options, and
The two options, option 1 and 4, refer to the state's deferred comp plan. So they would be, DRS needs statutory authorization in order to offer the annuitization feature that the IRS currently allows. Option 4 would just be requesting them to develop the Roth option as well. They are currently allowed to do that, haven't done that yet for any of the other plans the same way that they have with the annuitization. And then whatever that final DRS product ends up being, it would have the annuitization, it may or may not have the Roth. That final product, then it would be required to be offered by all LEOFF employers to all LEOFF employees.
Okay, so the way I understand, right now we have an amendment to include options 1 and 4 in the motion. That is the question before you. Any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing and hearing none, all in favor of the amendment to include options 1 and 4 into the motion, please signify by saying aye. Oh,
Aye.
sorry. Got our vote here on the amendment. Okay, that motion carries. So now we have, or the amendment carries. Now we are back on the motion as amended. So the motion before you would,
Mr. Chair, just a question.
yeah,
Is my understanding that participating in Washington State DRS deferred comp program, the cost is borne by the employee that participates, not the employer.
The administrative cost of actually managing the plan, there may be some employer costs with regard to offering the additional option. I mean, in terms of it's probably front-end tooling up, I would guess.
can I ask that question? Because I've heard that a number of times here, and David, you mentioned it. What are those costs? I mean, like we talked about this earlier with that payroll deduction slot, I mean, I don't understand those costs, and they're essentially a one-time fixed cost to program a new payroll slot. And I know when we get in our employer, if they wanted to add United Way to the slot, they do it. So I don't get that part of it, and I'd like to better understand it.
Chair and board members, that would be a longer conversation. One, as an administrator of various cities and staff that have lots of other things on their plate, this would require additional work that will take away from your members on other things that they could be providing to you. Now, yes, there is the one-time cost, but on this one specifically, we in the city of Tukwila, we have 3 options. So now with this requirement, if this passes and it goes through the legislature, we'll now have 4, I guess. And so we already staff up. We provide those services. Our HR department, we have a full HR department. We provide time and attention for those agencies to come and speak to our members. But that means usually that a staff person is at that training. We provide information. We provide support to all our members. And so that's the kind of things that I'm thinking about in these very small communities that you're requiring. Tukwila will be okay. I'm sure we'll be fine. I'm thinking these 40% of these smaller communities that you're mandating that person who has other things on their plate, now you've added to their workload for an option that they already have. But now it's another mandate for them. And I just need to hear from them. I haven't heard anything from any of our members that they feel like they are not having this. I am concerned that at the bargaining table, some members aren't getting this, and so now you're going to put legislation. That concerns me. That you're bypassing the collective bargaining agreements that we may have. I don't think we do in our city because we offer it to everyone. But those are concerns I have, and that anytime you do a requirement, and we all have this, is of mandates that are unfunded. Unfunded mandates hit you every single time about the training and things like that, and this is just another one on that list.
Jack?
I think when you get into the collective bargaining process, requiring that it be offered doesn't mean that the employer has to pay for it. It can still be the employee pay for it. And just having that option available, you look at today's climate with the retirement systems nationwide, we've kind of taken the ball and ran with it. Why wouldn't we? Why wouldn't we make those offerings so that they can pay for their own retirement instead of going back to the well?
Okay. David?
It's unfortunate. This board usually works in a consensus fashion, and I really do feel that a voice on this board from the impact on the employers and the agencies is not being heard. I'd much rather have an 11-0 vote going forward on making sure that we have options for all our employers, but that's not going to happen, unfortunately.
Wally?
Steve or anybody else on the board, we've been talking about these issues for months, and we publish the minutes, we publish the agenda. Has anybody received any feedback from an employer, from a member concerned about any of these options?
There was some concern expressed at the DRS Employer Advisory Committee when a similar issue was discussed with respect to requiring all public employers to offer the state's deferred comp plan. So in other words, that would apply to all public employees, all public employers. There was some concern raised in that venue, and those comments were then passed on as well. So that's one area in particular. There was another forum, I think it dealt with a task force on aging, and that concept was rolled out, and then there were no concerns raised at that. So
was the commentary predicated on the monetary portion of the legislation, or was it?
No, it had to do with potential interference with exclusivity arrangements that some of the employers have worked out, where they've agreed with a provider that they will offer only that provider to their members.
Just to follow up on that a little bit on your question, there was the member from King County who's in that employer organization of DRS did contact board staff directly on this proposal specifically and express concerns. And I think, as Steve mentioned, I think some of that had to do with the exclusivity issues. And I did talk to Candace Bach at Association of Washington Cities, and I think she had many of the same concerns that board member Klein has expressed.
Senator?
Yes, I have not been contacted by any member, but I meet with my council of governments, which is the mayors and councils of all the communities I represent. And every year the unfunded mandates or the mandates that come down are a subject of discussion, and they are opposed to mandates. Thank you.
Further discussion? Patrick?
Motion to table.
Okay, motion to table is in order. It's been seconded, and it's not debatable. Not debatable. So the vote is before you there. All those in favor of the motion to table, please enter it into your iPad. Okay, motion to table is confirmed. So this subject will be tabled.
Can I speak to the past motion? Now that it's
without
passed.
objection,
I'm not against the amended motion. I support it, but I would like to get some more information as far as costs, DRS costs, and also input related to the non-participating agencies. More information would help in the decision. And I think we could pass it in. I'll still be. I'm in favor of it now, but I'd like to have more information, and if it would appeal to a couple of dissenting members, I don't see the harm in doing it. No.
okay. Wally?
Paul, I'd like to know about a little bit more about the exclusivity agreements that we keep speaking of. Why is there such resistance from the employers to participate in the state's plan?
Absolutely.
That would be something for a future meeting. Okay. I don't think there are, just by general background, I'm not sure when you say more information, exactly how much more information you're requesting. But there are some providers who, as part of their contracts with individual employers, will ask that they be the only provider in that jurisdiction, and they'll incorporate that exclusivity agreement as part of their contract with the provider, and then or with the jurisdiction. How many there are, what they get or give in exchange for that, we don't have any information on that kind of stuff that we're prepared to present to you today.
Oh, Jack?
Question for our learned counsel. Would it be in order to ask if option 1 and option 4 could, since they're not requiring but they're just authorizing, that we could revote on those?
The original motion that was tabled was for all three, so you would have to make a separate motion to cover option 1 and 4. That would require a new motion.
Is that possible to do that? It's a separate.
Since you've already tabled all three.
But they were two separate motions. There was a motion to amend.
All three options. It was, yeah.
Was seconded? Time for me to look through your.
Can we do that on our break?
Yeah.
Okay, so the question here is whether or not when the motion for all three options as a package is tabled, whether or not you could pull 1, 2, or 1 or 2 back off or bring it up as a separate motion. Okay.
And would that be because one's required and the other two are just authorized? Is that your thoughts on that?
Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay. Okay, we'll do item number 5 before we break for lunch.
By way of introduction, one of the topics that you brought up in the expectation meeting in September was a desire to have something going on during the session, during the meeting things. And Ryan, this is kind of a follow-up to that discussion. With that, I will turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Steve. For the record, Ryan Frost, research analyst for the board. And this is really a discussion about what the board wants to see for meetings during this upcoming session. So a little bit of overview is, again, the question is, what does a successful board meeting during session look like to you? We'll go a little bit over the structure, how we should meet in person, online, the length of the meeting. Would you like to keep it short, longer, more topics, less topics? The content, some of the topics you'd be interested in. And finally, the availability of the board members, and if there's only going to be a couple that can come, what we should do. So there's a couple different options for how the board meeting should be structured. The first option would really be to have a physical meeting, come to Olympia, meet as usual, keep the status quo. The other option is to have an electronic meeting. You can stream it out over the internet so that you could log in with your iPad or a computer. Could do a Skype chat or a GoToMeeting, which are basically the same thing. Or third, have a conference call where you just dial in the number, how you call in now. For length, again, there's two options. You can have a longer meeting, scheduled how basically we do a board meeting now, multiple topics. Again, the longer meetings, you'd have more opportunity for education and discussion, but you'd have to take a day off of your calendar to come. Or a shorter meeting, which would last from an hour up until lunch, where we just cover one or two topics. So these are just some of the ideas of topics that staff could prepare each month. Any additional topics of interest would obviously be very helpful. And so some of the topics were the new GASB requirements, retiree medical, a federal ledge update, a state ledge update, communications plan, and extending defined benefits to the private sector. And again, any other topics would be helpful. And as far as availability goes, we reached out to Dawn, and she helped us out with this next part. And she advised us to treat the meetings as open public meetings, even if it's just in educational topics, and to leave it open so that members of the public can attend. So even if it's going to be like a video chat, it's held in a room where the public could come see it. She also advised to go through the normal board meeting process, to have a home base, like I was saying, where the meeting is kicked off. So it would have to be kicked off just as the chair kicks off meetings now. And if there's not going to be a quorum at the meeting, to basically set it up so that no future action would be required at that meeting. So just pretty basic stuff. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions or any discussion.
Ryan, do we have the ability to Skype video chat now?
Yes.
With the new laptops or iPads?
Yes.
I can hardly wait to see you.
David?
I appreciate the staff looking at this, because in our retreat setting, this was one of those things of how do we keep the connection of the board. So I like all the different options, and I'll just jump in with, I like it focused on one topic, maybe a shorter meeting, because I can carve out 1 to 3 hours, and it's like, what is that a topic of interest to me? I really do want us to try some of this electronic media, Skyping. It'd be interesting to me to find out if we can make that work, and maybe this is a learning process. But I'd love those topics. I'd love us to vote. Any one of those would be interesting to me to sit down. And more as receiving information, it would be nice as if we did a board meeting, is just to get an update from you, Steve, about what's going on. Quick little update. Here's an hour or two about this topic. And then see if I can actually make the technology work. Because I think that will help us later on when people are trying to attend this meeting and they can't be here, that we've learned that and then we've gotten the bugs out. Because I know as a member who's tried to call in a few times on the meetings, it really isn't an enjoyable experience on either end. So if we could make that a better, so that we have the full board represented when we're not a full board, that it hurts all of us because we don't hear everyone around. So that would be my suggestion.
I would plan at a minimum that every one of these meetings would include a legislative update during session and also an administrative update. Those were the two things that were virtually universal in board members' desire. You wanted to be kept informed on what's going on in the office, especially if it was 6 months between meetings, and you wanted to know what was going on with session during session. So those two are givens, and that may be most, if not all, of that hour. If you were going to go the shorter meeting, it would maybe just focused on those types of topics and discussions around those. The other thing is I didn't want at least all the indications are right now that don't expect to have session last 6 months. Yes. So this may be a perfect opportunity to hopefully test it out on like one or two meetings. You know, if it's a 60-day session and we miss a couple of meetings, your point about testing out that's one of the things that I see as a benefit of this as well. We're trying to expand our offerings of services that we provide to board members, and this is a perfect vehicle to kind of test out some of that and maybe work out, hopefully there won't be any bugs, but work out some issues, identify issues before we're into interim and full board meetings again.
Paul?
I kind of concur with David's comments here. I'd be in favor of trying out this new electronic type of communications that we have available to us now, and to learn how to use it and see if it's going to be effective. I would rather see a shorter type of meeting so I don't have to sit in front of this thing for hours and hours, but I would be interested in the administrative update and the legislative update, and also maybe some type of a short educational briefing on something, and just keep the time frame down to a shorter period of time. So that's what I'd be in favor of.
Okay. Further comments or discussion? So, Steve, are you or staff looking for a specific direction here, or is this a general consensus?
Either way, if you were to direct us in any way, you could do that in the form of a motion. Absent any sort of direction to the contrary, the intent is that we will plan on doing these, keeping the meetings are already scheduled, so no motions required for that, and it would simply be updating the agenda and the notice to the public to show an abbreviated, if you will, agenda, and potentially a change in availability. So, for instance, if it was going to be a home base that the public could listen to video, perhaps it wouldn't necessarily need to be the SIB boardroom, and it might be the conference room down at the Left 2 office, something along those lines.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Ryan.
Thanks.
I think we've reached a point where we can take a break, recess for lunch. Suggest we probably go and we'll reconvene at about 12:15. Okay, we'll be in recess.
Healthy question to evaluate. Also, through this process, it will hopefully have the effect it'll help you build your relationships, which was also something that during the meetings you had on your expectations, you identified as something that you want to improve on, is your relationships. All right. So there are different areas that you'll be evaluating the board on. How clear are you? What about what your roles and responsibilities are? Effectiveness in policy making, how well you do planning and performance, your rules of procedures, your conduct and practices, if you will, and the kind of relationships that you have. We'll be gathering these results and we'll be reporting them back to you annually. Some of this will be in an open public meeting to the extent that any of it is evaluation of personnel. That may be more appropriate then for an executive session, and to the extent that topics are identified that you guys want to work on, we can schedule work sessions. For instance, this may identify the types of things you'd want on the agenda for your offsite next year. There's three parts. First off is your individual evaluation, your evaluation of yourself. How effective do you feel you're being as a board member? What do you feel you're adding to the board? Where could you possibly improve? Secondly would be your evaluation of the board as a whole and how effective this board as a whole is. And finally, there would be input from me on the evaluation of the board as a whole. I won't be evaluating the effectiveness of individual board members, but I'd be providing some input on how effective I feel you are as a group, as a body. We are going to give you the evaluation and ask that you complete it. This will be the initial one, and then we'll report on the results next interim. And then also during next interim, we'll talk about potential additional steps that you may want to incorporate into this. Different boards have different ways of handling this. And so, for instance, in some cases, the executive director is asked to evaluate individual board members. That's one possibility. Another is that lots of boards have board members evaluate each other. So you wouldn't just evaluate yourself, but you'd evaluate the effectiveness of other board members, and you'd hear from your other board members how they evaluate your effectiveness. That's another possibility. Term limits. A number of boards have moved to limiting the number of the length of service for board members. There is no term limits in statute on the board, but I will say that the Boards and Commissions representative from the governor's office expressed to me earlier this year, while new appointments were being considered, that Governor Inslee has a very strong belief that terms for board members should be limited, and that some ways kind of addressing that issue that other boards have gone on is that first terms are kind of wide open, if you will, but after that, in order to be eligible to serve for successive terms, there may be continuing education requirements or minimum skill assessments, so that if somebody wants to continue on the board, then they have to meet certain pre-agreed, identified standards for demonstrating that commitment. Attendance at board meetings, for instance, is another common requirement if you want to continue to serve on a board. And then another idea that was thrown out that we'll bring back to you is evaluations of each board meeting. It's fairly common for a lot of the boards at the end of each meeting, all the board members head off into executive session, and initially they would have some staff there potentially to say how they felt like this meeting went, You'd be able to provide input on what did and didn't work for you, for instance, about this particular meeting right while it was fresh. And then, following that, send all the staff out of the room altogether. And you guys, by yourselves, would be able to talk about how you felt the meeting went. So, for instance, if something about the meeting didn't go well and you felt like uncomfortable saying that in front of me, maybe because it was something that I did that didn't contribute to the meeting going well, this would give you an opportunity to have that kind of free, open dialogue. And then following that meeting, that kind of the results or the assessment would be communicated by the chair back to me so that we could incorporate changes into improved service for upcoming meetings. So the plan is we'll talk with you about all of these next steps in the upcoming interim and decide whether or not you want to move forward with any of them. But for now, we'll just simply be providing you with this initial assessment. We'd ask that you return the results to us before the next scheduled meeting date, and we'll follow up with you if we don't get it back. So we'll give you a kind of a month. It's a fairly comprehensive set of criteria. If you have any questions, you can feel free to contact me or Tim about a particular question if you're struggling with it. We tried to weed through the questions and identify some sample ones that, for instance, didn't seem to apply to our board. Maybe they dealt with specific issues of investments or something along those lines. Tried to screen all of that out and keep it relevant for you. But if there's something in there that you have questions about, please contact us. I did want to mention, I apologize for not mentioning this earlier, but during the admin update, I intended to let all of you know that Glenn Olson wanted to apologize for not being able to make this meeting and to let all of you know that he is going to be submitting his resignation from the board. His duties in his new job at Kitsap have increased, and he feels that things are running very well here at the board. He intends to try to stay on, try to continue working for the Select Committee on Pension Policy. He had a brief note that he wanted. Please communicate to my fellow board members how proud I am to have worked with such a dedicated and ethical company of civil servants. Their constancy has created a retirement plan that is unparalleled in this nation in its fiscal prudence and health. Stay the course and don't move those rates. So there was no proposals to move rates. So that feedback may be for a future meeting. But anyway, I wanted to share that with you and at Glenn's request, and I apologize for getting that earlier. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions about the self-evaluation at this point in time, but otherwise that concludes my presentation, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Nelson, when you get to the peer evaluations of individual board members, I've been involved in some of that stuff before at my agency through the promotional process. I would be dead set against that. I think if I have issues with Pat or Mark or anybody in here, I would go to them and talk to them. I think it's very easy to write something about someone you wish you'd have never written.
And that is an excellent point, Jack. Again, all of those other items that I brought out, those have pros and cons. Right. And there are a number of boards who are dead set against peer-to-peer evaluations just for some of the issues that you mentioned. Not only that you say something maybe that you wish you hadn't said, but also it allows. There's sometimes a concern that evaluations are based on something other than performance. There'll be feuding over, you guys would be mad at the legislature and take it out on Representative Holy and his evaluation or something along those lines, whether it has anything to do with his service on the board or not. Those kind of issues tend to crop up in that peer-to-peer, but none of those other topics that we mentioned, there is no plan to implement any of them without further direction from the board. All of those are going to be topics that you will have to tell us you want. I have some of the same concerns about providing an executive director evaluation, and then there's always that challenge. You really have to have mature relationships for that kind of trust and that kind of peer-to-peer work to work. And so you might have that kind of relationship with some board members, like you mentioned, where you feel totally comfortable talking to them, and they'd feel completely comfortable getting that kind of input from you. I appreciate all the input that I get from you guys, but yeah, going the other way, it's also tough. You heard Mr. Langford mentioned earlier, doesn't envy the job that you guys have to do sometimes, balancing competing policy interests, and I understand that as well. And so to the extent that there was any kind of peer-to-peer evaluation, or executive director evaluation, it would tend to be things like, not subjective items, or it would be things like you can't help if you don't show up, or when you participate, you bring great points forward. Participate more. It would have to be fairly generic types of or otherwise it could do more harm, for instance, than it could help. But we'll talk about all of those next year, Jack.
Senator, you had a comment for Steve?
No, it's just a question. Filling this out, are we supposed to do it electronically, and if so, how?
Tammy will help you with that, and because I can't.
I played with it. I couldn't get there.
Okay. So. All right. Well, you're in the same place I am. I couldn't, but we will. She'll be able to help you out if there's any kind of glitch. She'll also know how to fix it. Are there any other questions? All right.
Item number 11, which is future meetings.
At this point in time, the next scheduled meeting is January. We do intend to have a meeting with an abbreviated agenda consisting of an admin update and a ledge update. To the extent that we can prepare any other kind of educational briefing ahead of time, we'll let you know and do that. One of the concerns that we'd have is we don't want to do an educational briefing on the topic that everybody's interested in if only, say 4 board members can attend the meeting and then have to do it again later in the interim. But at a very minimum, we are planning on having the January meeting with a shortened agenda to include at least an admin and session update. That's the only.
Okay. So I take it, Steve, at the next meeting that we'll get a report from you on the educational conference that you went to?
That's actually a good point. One of the things that, for instance, another best practice, the State Investment Board, anytime board members, not just administrative staff, Mr. Chair, but anytime board members attend training, then they are required to provide a report to the board about the training that they received. You, as a member of the State Investment Board, can look forward to that responsibility in the future.
Tomorrow.
And given the expense, both for board member training and for staff training, that makes a lot of sense. At the staff level, we do come back and meet as a group to go over what we've learned when one of us or a couple of us get a chance to go out and train, because we can't send everybody, and even if it's something that would benefit everybody in the office financially, you can't do that. So that's how we kind of try to share it, and you can incorporate that into the board meeting process as well.
I'll take that as a no.
Not today. Not today. If you want a briefing in the future, I would be happy to do that.
Okay. Well, is there any other business to come before the board? All right. Well, then I would like to say thank you for your attendance today. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody, and drive safely. And we are adjourned.